is Sharon Jeffis. Today we're going to talk about cityscapes and we're going to talk about 1 and 2 point perspective. We talked a lot about atmospheric perspective and we've talked about the elements of art. We haven't done a lot of formal things on perspective, 1 and 2 point perspective, so that's what we're going to talk about today. If you're 8 or 9 years old, sometimes even 10, you might not get perspective. It's a difficult thing. You might not even get it till a little bit later. It's a very mathematical type thing. It's very precise, just like the classic Greek proportions of the face. If you follow the directions, it's going to look like you want it to look. When you look at the pictures that I've selected, you can see examples of atmospheric and linear perspective. A little history on perspective. Brunelleschi, in the time of the Renaissance, he was the one that actually developed linear perspective, and it became very important after the Renaissance. Artists have used it for years and centuries. And Brunelleschi designed the dome. He was actually the first engineer because the Dome of Florence, he actually designed it and then had to figure out how to get it up there. So he had to design pulleys and things to get it up there. So he's really considered the first engineer. And they say that architects go to Florence and weep practically. They love it. This is such a big deal. Just like Louis Sullivan is the father of the skyscraper. Not a lot of people know, but in St. Louis, architects are very aware of the Wainwright building, very special building in St. Louis, Missouri, that was built by the father of the skyscraper, Louis Sullivan, who mentored Frank Lloyd Wright, another very important architect. If you love this that we're going to do today, you might consider architecture, architectural engineering. Again, this is more of a left brain type thing with art. And the first picture we're going to look at is Brighton, the front and the chain pier seen in the distance, and it's by Frederick Woolidge. And if you look at the picture very carefully, when you look at perspective, you think you have your horizon line and your vanishing point. And a 1 point perspective, it's just like if you stood on railroad tracks. If you stand on railroad tracks, you look straight back, it looks like it goes to a point. If you are on a very straight road and you stand at the road, it looks like it meets at a point in the distance. However, if you were in the distance, it would be the exact same measurement. If you have tiles on your ceiling, if you measure, you take your hand and you measure like 1, 2 times the length of my hand, and then if I go in the very end of the room and I measure again the room, the corners, it's just 1. Because it appears to be getting smaller. In a 1 point perspective, all vertical stay vertical, all horizontal stay horizontal, all other lines meet at a vanishing point. And what's so neat about the pictures we're going to look at is you can see the fading in the distance. You can see the use of not only linear perspective, but atmospheric perspective as well. The figures get a little bit lighter in color and of course smaller. Everything is in perspective. You know, you can't do a railroad track and have telephone poles beside it and have the telephone poles not get smaller as well. So when you use linear perspective, you need to remember that you want to have everything in perspective in the correct proportions. Now the second picture we're going to look at is view from Taubenstrasse on Friedrichstrasse in Berlin. That was a real task because I'm not really familiar with German, but this is a fabulous example of a 1 point perspective in a cityscape. I just love it. And you can see your use, you can see your point in the distance, and you can see the rule of thirds. When you do a work of art, you place things in a certain way. And so, you know, composition is important, and people just don't come up with these paintings. They think it through. They do sketches. They think about it first. And you can see this is very well thought out, and things are getting lighter in the background. And the next one is a very famous picture, the Boulevard Marte on the winter morning. And of course, the master Pissarro did the cityscape. For Impressionism, he's the most famous for his cityscapes. There's another picture we're going to look at by Chamberlain. And this picture, Chamberlain has a book this thick. I love it. He traveled all over Europe and he drew buildings. He was an architect and obviously a very good artist. And you look at his book and you see all these amazing cities and buildings that he's been able to have for us to look at, and even very old castles, older things and newer things. And you can see again here, he's using 1-point perspective, and you see the blur of the city in the background. So you do have your atmospheric perspective as well. Now we're going to look at 2 more works of art. When you think of cityscapes in art, these are very, very famous ones. View of Toledo by El Greco. And if you are a younger student and you just want to use basic geometric shapes and create, if you want to create a cityscape, you can certainly do it that way. And El Greco was like a forerunner of Expressionism. He captured such a feeling in the view of Toledo. And it's like a storm is coming, and what colors would you use? He's not so worried about your atmospheric perspective, but he's actually capturing a scene. And View of Delft, I actually love this picture. There's so many things that are in the picture that Vermeer does, and it's such a sense of quiet and stillness in his work. It always amazes me to see that. Again, View of Delft's a very, very famous cityscape in art. And the last picture we're going to look at is a city. I found this in a very old book, and I immediately loved it because in a 1-point perspective, you're looking down, you're just seeing the 1 point, you're straight on, your verticals are vertical. In a 2-point perspective, you're standing on the corner and you're looking down both sides. And we're going to do a 1-point perspective, and we're going to do a 2-point perspective today. So you need your pencil, and of course you need a ruler, you need paper, and we're going to use black paper and chalk. We're going to do a nighttime bridge, which will be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, our first project, we're going to do a cityscape looking down from the tallest building. And what we're going to create is we're going to create roads, our intersection. So we use our ruler, and you can do this in 1 inch or you can do it in 1/2 inch. But we're going to be looking down, like say we were in Chicago and we were looking down from the tallest building. If you love comic strip art, this is a really good thing to know, 1-point perspective. And we can do a variety of these. When you're reading the lesson, there'll be several different 1-point perspectives that you can try. We'll just go through these, but you can certainly do 1-point perspectives in other ways. The thing about perspective is you really have to sort of, again, until you get to a certain point, you just need to follow directions step by step. And it's very easy to be successful if you can follow the directions. So what you want to do is you want to put 4 squares in each of the corners. Now you need to make sure that your verticals are vertical and your horizontals are horizontal. You can cite these, but they're not going to be as good as if you use your ruler. And a lot of times, I could have somebody, well, I don't think I need my ruler, so they'll just make it crooked. And if it's crooked, it's not going to turn out as well. That's why you have your ruler. So what you want to do is you want to put in each of the corners, you want to put a square, and you want to leave room. Now, I want to make it look like I have 2 great views of a city, and one of them is a tightrope walker is looking down. It's so interesting. And another, there's a leg of a helicopter person, like it's an interesting thing looking down. What would it be like when you're looking down from the tallest building? So you can think of different really creative ways to do it. You probably see things on top of the buildings. I have a sort of a fear of heights, so I don't even want to know what's on top of the buildings. I'm sure some of you have been on the top. You know what's there. But so there's swimming pools and a lot of different things. Now, what you do, once you get your squares on there, what you do is you take your ruler and you put it on the point in the center. This is your vanishing point. And what we're going to do is we're going to take and draw our lines to the city street. I'm not going to draw them to the vanishing point, but I'm going to keep my ruler there. I'm just going to take the corners of the buildings and I'm going to draw them to the vanishing point. Now, my windows also have to be the same way. I'm going to do that with all 4. You know, sometimes you think, I really need to draw it to the middle of the road. No, you don't really need to do that. You only go to the street. And you can get as detailed with this picture. I've had kids do, you know, cars and sidewalks and, oh my goodness, just very elaborate things with this. But just to understand the concept is a good thing. It might not be something that you enjoy a lot, but just to understand how to do it is a good thing. Now you can see here as I'm working that I am creating something that looks three-dimensional. So I'm going to go just to the corner. Now, I have my buildings. Let's say I want to do a building that is going to be a glass building right here. I have to remember of course you can always do circular things, but the thing I want to remember is that all my verticals are vertical, all my horizontals are horizontal, all my other lines meet at a vanishing point. So if I do this building and I make it like that, I'm doing my glass building, then what I need to do is I'm going to make and I have to be parallel. These have to be parallel. Now this is the easiest, this is just probably the very easiest building to do. But the other kind of windows, we can do some of those too, and they have to be in perspective because they're getting smaller as you go back. So there's my first building. Now, of course, I'm looking down on it, and you could do little effects, like, you know, if you want to make it look glassy, you can do that. Now, if I want to put another building beside one of these buildings, let's say I want to do that. So I'm going to create, again, I have my lines that are vertical and horizontal, and my other lines that go to a vanishing point. It goes to the vanishing point. So let's say I want to put another building. I probably won't be able to see the whole building because there's overlapping, and overlapping is one of the principles of art, being able to understand about that. But I can put the buildings beside there. And I have another building there. And what I want to do is, if you could actually make a circular type at the top of the building, as long as your other, you know, you could make like maybe a building, make an oval, but all your lines that are straight follow the vanishing point. I have vertical and horizontal, and then lines, of course, that the lines that go to the vanishing point. Now, if I put another building, I could do another building on this side. And the time element, once you understand how to do this, you can see how you're putting your buildings there. You're looking down. If you wanted to do another kind of a window, you can do anything with your pencil. What you learn is you want to go pretty light if you're not sure. If you're just trying to get something down there where you want it to be, work light so you can use your eraser. And every time you forget to use that vanishing point, which I did forget a little bit there, you're going to have to redo it if you want it to be consistent. But your windows get smaller as they go, as they get further away. And you're looking down, of course, they get much smaller. And you can make windows that are a little bit different. Just try to keep using your ruler. This is the kind of thing that if you have something to look at, like a city, you can notice the details, because there's always the differences in the details. And this is an extremely detailed picture when you start doing this. But it's so much fun to do, because you can just design your own, plan your own intersection in downtown Chicago or wherever. And when you do your windows, the windows I'm creating here are they're just like little separate entities. And I still have to use my guidelines if I want it to be good. I want it to be correct. So there's my first line of windows, and I would go with my windows, they get smaller as they go down. Now, the top, we can see the tops, and I could put something on there like maybe a swimming pool, or I think they have helicopter ports on the tops of buildings. I'm not sure what that would look like, but you could do a little research, put a helicopter port there, and you could start your cars, of course, looking down, they would look like little boxes. You could have trucks, but they wouldn't be, they're not in perspective because you're looking flat, you're looking down. Just like when you're looking at the end of your room, you look at the room that you're in, your verticals are vertical, your horizontals are horizontal. In the distance, things get smaller. They meet at a vanishing point. So you can have your intersection, and you can create a whole picture and a whole cityscape just using this method. Another one-point perspective that's very, very easy is a bridge. And I did this bridge last night just to give you the idea. You can put your city at the very end of the bridge, like you're going over the longest stone arch bridge, old stone arch bridge in the world, I believe, is over the Susquehanna in Pennsylvania. And my grandfather came over from Scotland and helped to build that bridge. And so it's a stone bridge. It's a really old stone bridge. So I'll show you how to do the stones in a minute, but we'll go ahead and do this on black paper with white chalk, and it's just a really fun and easy way to do it. The important thing to remember is you're standing at the wide end, and things get smaller as they go into the distance. And to know where your vanishing point is helps you with your proportion. You don't have to have it look flat. You can have it actually look like it's going way in the distance. And then as you use your atmospheric perspective, and it's all about really artists notice things. They really can see light. We talked about being able to see light, being sensitive to how things look, and then being able to transfer it in an original way. So we're going to start with this picture, and we're going to come up about a third of the way. And I think what we'll do, I think we'll just do that about a third of the way up, like that, and make a line like this. And I'm going to put a vanishing point on the line like this. And I'm going to, again, just use this as my guideline. This is my guideline. And I'm going to make an old stone arch bridge. The cityscape we looked at is very mathematical. If you want to, and I have a great website that you can go to learn one-point perspective in the lesson. It's excellent, and it's interactive. And it's a room in a one-point perspective. And I used to have kids do the room Narnia, the room where the wardrobe was, and to understand how even a carpet, the windows, everything goes back to that one point. The Last Supper is an excellent example of using the one-point perspective that Brunelleschi developed. Da Vinci did that. We're going to work on this old stone arch bridge. And first thing I'm going to do is I have my guideline, and I'm going to make my arches. An arch is an element of architecture. Crenellations, we looked at the wonderful Chrysler building. And that, of course, is Art Deco. But when you go into a city, you can recognize Gothic architecture, being able to understand the different elements of architecture is a really good thing. And then being able to put them in buildings. Another thing, I have a picture of a partially done cathedral in a Gothic style that's part of the lesson that you can actually print out. And then I have it very, it's the cathedral done by Chamberlain, by the way, and it's muted out so you can draw it and really learn a lot. It's a great lesson to really learn a lot. Now, if we start with our bridge here, what we're going to do is we're going to take our chalk or our pencil. You might have a white pencil, etc. But we're going to give a guideline to how big our stones need to be. How big do they need to be? Okay, I need to have them get smaller as they go back to my vanishing point, and this is the guideline that I'm going to use as they're going back. And we talked about light. Okay, there's my bridge, and you can see that it's larger here, of course, and it gets smaller as it goes back. Now, I want to create these stones, and it's an old stone arch bridge. It's not brick. It could be brick. You could have it be brick. Nothing is the same color in art. Light makes things different. So generally, if you did stones, they would be different. They'd have maybe some dark corners, some light corners. They'd all look just a little bit different. But you'd want them to get very small. You follow the lines of perspective as it goes back. You're using it as a guideline. And it gets smaller and smaller as they go into the distance. So when I get to the very end, they're very, very, very small. Very, very small. And of course, theoretically, naturally, if I would, do this one, it would get lighter in the distance if I colored it in. And the first picture we looked at, a lot of times it's really a nice thing to do your beautiful transparent, like we talked about with watercolor. You can do a mixed media, and you can do a picture of a place with watercolor and pen and ink and colored pencil. But just be careful with your technique that it doesn't distract from your design. You want to make sure that your technique is where it needs to be. Now, if I take and I shade my arches a little bit, so there's a little bit of a shadow there. And this is at night, so you could even create a comet or some stars in the sky. And we talked about how line defines shape. And so you could make a moon. But everything you do, you need to make sure that if you're being consistent, trying to make it look real, you want it to be shaded. You don't want it to just be the same color. Shading, shadow, texture, line, shape, textures, elements of art. So you can add different things to this to make it look interesting. You can even put a shadow underneath your bridge. You can put a person in a boat. And then in atmospheric perspective, your water closer to you, if you even look at photographs, it's always a little darker. So you can work on your water a little bit. Create your picture. And the point is, there's many one-point perspectives you can do. And you practice, practice, practice. Just remember to use your ruler and the basic rules. In a one-point perspective, all verticals are vertical, all horizontals are horizontal, and all your other lines meet at a vanishing point. So you can achieve a lot of success with just knowing that basic thing, and it can help you a lot in your pictures. We're going to talk about two-point perspective, and two-point perspective, it's very easy. You have two vanishing points instead of just one, and you need to remember you're standing at the corner of something. You're looking back both sides, And then, of course, there's 3-point perspective, but this is just a beginning art class to familiarize you with basic things. So we're really not going to get that complex. We're going to go over 2-point perspective. The rule is you want to remember all verticals are vertical, all other lines meet at the vanishing point. So you need to create a figure where you have your horizon line come up about 1/3 of the way. You have your vertical line, and then you have your vanishing points. So you need to remember you want to create, we're going to create an old Scottish castle. And you could even create this on a hill. You could make it a very interesting picture. But you're going to be standing at the corner of the castle, and you're going to be looking back both sides of the castle. So if I take and I put my vertical line here, and I'm going to this is going to be my basic castle right here. And I want to probably, I'm going to put the arch, an old stone arch, about where my horizon line is. And I'm going to make an oblique, sort of a flattened circle there, because of course, you know, you have your moat and you have your door to your castle, and then you have your windows, which are like little slits, not really a very complicated window, because the older the castle is, they would hang up tapestries in the castle. So we're going to go ahead and give ourselves, first of all, we're going to let ourselves just know how big the stones need to be. So we're going to go and take all of our lines the same way we did with the 1 point, but instead of just one way, we can see both sides of a building. And in your lesson, you'll have several things. If you want to do this perspective and you enjoy it, you'll have several, you know, there's a house, a covered bridge. You can do different things in a 2-point perspective. A city in 2-point perspective. Once you learn the principle of being able to see both sides, it becomes very easy to do. And again, these are exercises you can be real creative and be original with, but it's just showing you these basic tenets of perspective so that you can do this with all your artwork. I had an Aunt Helen, and she really never did get perspective, but she sold her work for really nice, good money, and she couldn't even do an outhouse in perspective. She had trouble with it, but she had an incredible sense of color. It was fabulous, and her work didn't have to have that. So, you know, when you think about it, it might not be your forte, but it's important to really understand it and know how to do it. Now I'm going to make crenellations in my castle, but I'm going to make a little fort type thing at the top here on this side, and I'm going to use my vanishing point, my vertical line, and then I'm going to turn it into an old building. And I actually have this really neat paper I let kids use sometime. It's like, I don't know, it's so old. It's the first, pretty much the first computer paper ever made, because it's all old looking, and it's the coolest thing to work on. It's brownish, it looks old, and it's real fun to create old things on old paper. You know, shapes of things are fun too, you know, when you're drawing. A lot of the folk art, they would draw buildings as a frame and then put something in the frame. So you can be really creative with that. Now, I'm going to, at the top of this, I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to create some crenellations. And crenellations, again, just like a flying buttress and just different things in art, they're just elements of architecture that you can recognize. I love Gothic architecture especially, but I want to keep everything pretty much in perspective, and then I can make it irregular. And I can have some of the stones falling off. I love the description of the castle of Cair Paravel in the Narnia books, of course. It's very, very cool and very interesting. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create, of course, with a castle, you know, you have the rounded, the towers, and as well. But this is a pretty good way to learn 2-point perspective, doing it this way, I think. Now I'm going to have another tower here. And then I'm going to create some crenellations. I use this. I still have the idea of I'm looking at both sides. I want to see both sides. Just like you look at a box and you can see both sides of the box. You want to see both sides. And so to do that, you have to use your vanishing points. Your lines are vertical, horizontal, or they go to the vanishing point. Once you get your structure in, it's an easy thing to make it look like an old castle, but you want to get your structure in first. And you can take your eraser, and you can use your eraser. There's so many neat tools that you can use when you're drawing. You can use a protractor. When I start doing my castle, then I'm going to make sure again that I'm using my vanishing point, because I want my old stones, even though they're going to be irregular, I want them still to look, I want them to be consistent. So if I start turning these into stones, and this works well with charcoal too. You can do this in charcoal. Pen and ink. You have your different ways of shading, smudging and cross-hatching, stroking, different ways you can shade. But it's a good idea to decide where your light is coming from. If your light's coming from here, then your stones and this side of the castle, you really want to show that. You want it to be a little darker, because that's going to help your picture to look more real. But if I create these old stones here, the whole castle is going to be, of course, old stones, like that. And if I really want to do a finished drawing, of course, I want them to be shaded, different places. And you know, if I can even maybe I want to put a flag there or something. Have a flag, something flying from the top of the castle, something like that. You can add all kinds of things to this to make it look interesting. But if it is an old stone castle, then it's going to look old. It's not going to look like brick or like wood. It's going to look like it's just created out of old stones. And that takes a lot of time. And when you think of the buildings that were created by the ancient peoples, you know, they're so magnificent, and you think, how in the world were they able to get the stones up there? And see, these stones are really big. If I decide, well, I think I need smaller stones, that's going to take me more time and more patience. But you know, if you really want your drawing to be good, you're going to have to spend a little time on it. And it doesn't happen, of course, overnight. It does take time. So I think I'm going to make my stones a little bit smaller. And I'm using the guideline of my vanishing point to do it. Because although my stones are irregular, I still want to see them getting, in a really a consistent way, see them getting smaller. And that way my picture is going to look more real. So as I'm working with my stones, and then we can put the windows in, etc. The castles that you see, like in Scotland, and I've looked at them, and they have these stones. They were made, the old ones were made out of these old stones, and they're pretty simple. They're not like the very elaborate basilicas and cathedrals, of course. They're just an old stone castle. So you want to try to create the age. And you need to be consistent about it. And then, of course, I would want to create my arch. I want to be consistent where my light falls. It's so important to know where your light falls, because you want to consistently use that and have everything be shaded in the correct way. My light, of course, is from this direction, And this, I'm going to have this side, I think, be a little bit darker there. But again, I want to do the crenellations because the castles had crenellations. And that was a mark that they had. So I want you to work on your castle, and we'll show you this at the end so you can see how it looks finished. Today we talked about 1 and 2 point perspective. 1 point perspective, remember, is all verticals are vertical, all horizontals are horizontal, all other lines meet at a vanishing point. If you're trying to do a landscape, you're beside a road, or you're beside something where you have your straight lines, you create your atmospheric perspective. Like if it's a winding road, of course it's larger, you want to keep it in proportion, but you can be very precise if you know the rules of 1 point perspective. Of course, you know your linear perspective, your atmospheric perspective. It's important if you want things to look real to use them together. 2 point perspective, again, we talked a little bit about that. That is where you have all verticals stay vertical and all your other lines on both sides go to the vanishing point. You know, if you're looking back both sides of a building, sometimes I think about, one of my favorite ones was like, actually there's graffiti in the city and homeless people. And if you can think about a corner block of the city and looking back both sides and seeing the graffiti and, you know, seeing the homeless people, very powerful stuff, you know, very invokes a lot of emotion. It helps you to care and to realize that there are a lot of homeless people out there when you see that. Or you can do like this, like an old castle in Scotland. There's one that looks pretty similar to this. To be able to understand your basic premises, all verticals are vertical, all horizontals are horizontal, all other lines, they meet at that vanishing point. Number 2, all verticals stay vertical, all other lines meet at the vanishing point. Now you can get very detailed with this, but you need to make sure you understand this first, because if you try something very complex before you're ready, you can get very discouraged and you'll give it up. You won't want to do it anymore. So you want to start very simple and get it down. Once you do these, then you need to go on. If you love this, you can go on to more complex things in perspective.